everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Inkwell Gamers podcast. I'm Dana, and this is Dalton.
Hey, everybody.
And today we are going to be starting an entire set review of the first chapter. Over the course of the next 6 episodes, we will be going over our individual grades for each card in the set. Now, typically, we will be releasing episodes on a weekly basis. However, for our set review, we are planning on putting these out to you all within the next 2 weeks or so we can give you all of the baseline information as soon as possible before we jump into more of the fun stuff together, like starter deck upgrades or just deck building from the ground up. So we are going to be starting with Amber first, and then moving through the colors alphabetically, which is actually also the same order that they appear on the Lorcana's app. So before we get into each of our reviews, do you want to go over our grading process and the overall mechanics of Amber?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So let's go over the mechanics and some of the things that Amber is good at and maybe not so good at. So some of the keywords you'll see, the 2 main ones are going to be bodyguard and support. Bodyguard is really good at protecting your stuff, and support is really good at helping you make favorable trades when you're challenging. And healing is very similar to support in that, well, you're not making your creature stronger, you're reducing the damage that creature has on it, so you can make better trades in the future. Now, what this really means is that Amber is going to be playing to the board a lot and trying to create a significant board presence advantage over your opponent. And what this also means is that it's probably not going to be very well at playing from behind. There are not a lot of good removal spells or spells that deal with the board in general, so catching up is not going to be something that you're going to want to be doing or really able to do. So get your creatures on board early, let them use their bodyguard or support abilities or their healing to get ahead and stay ahead of the opponent. Now, as far as the grading process, we are going to have 5 grades. We're going to have the S grade. This is essentially the best card in, or one of the best cards in a specific color. Like, you couldn't imagine cutting it from your deck, and it has a really high power level. Now, when I say S grades, I'm thinking of like Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy, clearly one of the best cards in Steel. Then we'll go to the A grade. This is one of the best cards in that color, really high power level. It's played in most decks. It's possible that a few archetypes might not want it, but in general, you're going to play 4 of these unless there's a really specific reason to not. Also, in the A category could be really strong build-around cards. And when I think of really strong build-around cards, I'm thinking of Maurice, blue guy who we'll talk about in a couple episodes, Sapphire character that really pays you off for having a bunch of items in your deck. If there are good items and good support go alongside Maurice, he could be the whole engine of your deck, right? Next, we'll talk about the Bs. These are very solid role players, could be a 4 of in a lot of decks because they have a low mana cost, they're inkables, so you can always have them in your deck with very low opportunity cost, and they might not necessarily have a higher power level. There's also kind of another category to be, which these characters might have a really high power level but are expensive or maybe not necessarily inkable, so they don't fit in a lot of decks, but they're also not strong enough to kind of spawn their own archetypes by themselves. Then we'll talk about C. These are cards that will take a very specific deck to work, and they have kind of niche applications. Next, we'll talk about Cs. These are cards that will take very specific decks to work or could have niche applications, or you might just see them as a 1 or 2 of in some decks as tech cards, for example. And then we'll have Ds, which are just cards that you're most likely never going to play. Some may fit a specific deck, but not very often will these cards be included in most of your decks. With that being said, Dana, let's get started on the set review. What do you think?
All right, sounds good. Okay, so starting with the first card, we have Ariel on Human Legs. So she is a 4-drop, so 4 ink to cast. Her strength is 3, willpower 4. She quests for 2, and she is voiceless, which means that you cannot exert her to sing songs. I personally, I graded her as a B, so I think she's a solid card. I don't think her being voiceless hinders her from being used as just a nice middleman to quest for 2 with. I think with her being a 3/4, she can hold her own while being challenged or challenging kind of early in that game. So, I don't know, do you agree?
Yeah, I gave her a C. When I was trying to do this, I was kind of trying to compare her to similar cards across other colors, and there's like a Maleficent and Sapphire that is essentially the exact same card, but it doesn't have the voiceless ability. I'm just not really sure when you're gonna put this in your deck, or how often. Maybe if you just need a solid 4-drop to fill your mana curve, that's possible, but to me, she's not making my deck very often.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I get that. Those are good. That's a good reason.
Let's go on to Ariel Spectacular Singer. This one I think is pretty good.
Yeah.
It is a 3-drop 2/3, so 2 strength, 3 willpower. It has Singer 5, so it can sing songs that have a cost of 5 or less. And it has an ability that when you play this character, you can look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You can reveal a song card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Dana, what'd you give this one?
So I gave her a B as well. I think she has typical stats for her ink amount, so she's just a nice little mid-level glimmer. And then if you want to use her for that song ability, essentially it kind of gets broken down into 2, so it helps you be able to sing songs of a higher power. I know in our last episode I used her as an example where Hakuna Matata is a 4-drop, so if she didn't have that singing ability, she wouldn't be able to typically sing that because she's a 3. However, with her being a singer 5, she can play that card. And now for her musical debut ability, with her being able to look at the top 4 cards and picking out a song, I feel like as of right now, you might not have a deck with a lot of songs to where you'd be able to possibly even see a song if you use that ability. But I think in future sets, as more cards come out, there are better songs. I think people will start to build decks around more songs and more singers. So I think she'll be really good later. But I think for right now, at least just her being a 2/3 body, that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think that's pretty close to being exactly right. Like, she doesn't have the best stats for her mana cost. You will see some characters that are 3/3s or 3/4s that cost 3. And she only quests for 1. But she does create some card advantage. And the thing about songs is that while the cheaper ones aren't really that great, a lot of the expensive ones are pretty good. Grab Your Swords or Let It Go. Those are both songs that cost 5, and being able to play that a turn or 2 earlier than you normally might be able to for no mana is really strong. To me, she's a B or an A. I think in the future, when there are more cards released, she'll probably be one of the best build-around cards that we will see. But for right now, I just don't think there are enough songs, or that when you're using her musical debut ability, that you'll really find a good one. Right now you have to jam pack your deck with cards like Hakuna Matata, which really aren't that strong. But then again, it is creating card advantage, so maybe I am underrating it just a little bit with the B. Next, let's talk about Cinderella, Gentle and Kind. I gave this one a C. It's inkable. It's a 4-drop 2/5. It quests for 2. It has Singer 5 as well, so it can sing for 5. And it has the ability A Wonderful Dream, where you can exert it to remove up to 3 damage from chosen princess character. I have this as a C. I could see it being a B just because it seems like its baseline might be good enough. I had Ariel as a C, and this card just seems a lot better than Ariel to me.
The human leg one?
Yeah, human legs, yeah. This card can actually sing for a greater cost, and if you're in a princess deck, you can use that exert ability to help your combat, keep your more important characters alive, and it has a 5 willpower, which means it can probably survive a lot of things. I think I probably underrated this one initially because I gave it a C, but there's just not a lot that can go wrong with this card, and I think it has really good upside if you can find a princess deck. What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, so I actually was on the fence, and I gave it a range of B, C, so I'm kind of similar to you on that. I think her singing ability is good, and it's going to get even better as more sets and more songs come out. For her other ability, removing the 3 damage from chosen princess character, I think for right now, because there aren't very many
good princesses. I haven't ran into a princess deck on Pixelborn at all, and if I did, I'm sure this would be one of the most important cards in that deck, but I just haven't come across it. It's just not, the cards aren't there yet, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like that ability, not necessarily maybe being able to use it a lot right now, that kind of made me lean more towards C. But I think her questing for 2 and just being a singer 5 in general is why I was leaning towards B. So that's why I kind of got caught in the middle between the two.
Yeah, it's definitely better than Ariel on human legs. So, and we gave that a C. So it probably deserves a B, to be honest. Yeah. Go ahead with Goofy the Musketeer.
Goofy Musketeer. So we got a 5-drop. He is a 3/6, quests for 1. He is a bodyguard and also has another ability that is and 2 for T. So when you play this character, you may remove up to 2 damage from each of your Musketeer characters. Now I gave him a B. I think he's just he's a nice mid drop for the bodyguard ability, and is also making your opponent use multiple turns and or characters to banish, just because his willpower of 6 is so strong.
He has a big butt, as we would say.
Yeah, so you would have to either cause your opponent to use one of their bigger characters that they might not want to lose, or maybe double up. So then that would also play into the card advantage that we've been talking about too. So, and then that other ability, I think of as of right now, we only have a couple of Musketeers, and so it might not be utilized as much. I could see it being utilized more in the future, but I think at least for being a bodyguard, and a big bodyguard at that, that's at least enough for me to give it a B.
Yeah, I gave him a C. It's possible you're right as far as being a B goes. It's just maybe I was giving it too much of a downgrade because its Musketeer ability just isn't relevant right now. It does have pretty good stats for its mana cost. I think one of the biggest issues that we will see with this card, and I'm just comparing it to a card that I think is really good that we'll talk about later, which is the Ruby Maui. It just gets demolished by that card. But if you're not playing against Ruby, I do think that it's going to take a few resources for your opponent to take out Goofy, and that's kind of the whole point. As long as you have things to protect and you're not playing against Ruby, I think he'll be pretty decent. I could definitely see a B for him.
Yeah. All right, so next, Hades, King of Olympus. He's an 8-drop. You cannot ink him, and he is a 6/7. However, you can shift him for 6, which basically means if you have another Hades on the board already, you can, instead of paying all 8 of your ink to play him, you just have to pay 6, and you can put him on top of the other Hades already on your board and essentially play him for cheaper. And then they become 1, the damage stays. But it's a really nice way to, that shifting ability is a nice way to get your bigger cards on the board quicker than you normally would if you were to just pay a normal cost for them.
Right.
He does quest for 1 and has an additional ability that is Sinister Plot, so he gets +1 lore for each of the other villain characters you have in play. So what did you give this one?
I gave him a B, but I'm really not even sold that he should be that high right now. He's not inkable, so he doesn't have that early game versatility of just being an ink when you can't play him. He's really expensive, even if his shift cost is pretty expensive at 6. And you have to have a lot of other villains in play to make his Sinister Plot ability relevant. Because most other 6, 7, and 8 drop characters, they already quest for 2, 3, and 4. You actually have to do a lot of work and keep a lot of your characters in play, which is something that ideally Amber should be good at, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that. And if you just have Hades all by himself, he's just questing for 1, and that just does not, it just doesn't resonate with me as being a very good card. What'd you have him?
So we're kind of opposites on this one. I gave him an A. So now I'm questioning with your grade, but nonetheless, I get that he's expensive. I get that he's uninkable, but I think in combination with an Amethyst, if you do like an Amber Amethyst, I think, and then build a villain deck, I think that would be really good, which they already come together in a starter. So if you were to, when we talk about upgrades of the starter decks in a few episodes from now, if we make that color combo into a villain deck, I think it could be really good because Amethyst does have a lot of villains. You have Jafar, you have Ursula, Maleficent, Dr. Facilier, which he has a card that's really good that we'll get to. But I think if you build a deck around villains, then he would be really useful, even though he is expensive. But I don't know. That's just how I viewed him. I could see him working really well if you do build a villain deck.
Yeah, he has a good sized body, and he can definitely win you the game. I just don't think you can play 4 of him in a deck reliably, just because there will be times when you get stuck with 2 in your hand, you can't ink it, and then that leads you to not casting your other characters. So I can see where you're coming from, though.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Next one's going to be Hades, Lord of the Underworld. It is a 4-drop uninkable that quests for 1. It is a 3/2. And it has Well of Souls as its ability. When this character enters the battlefield, return a character from your discard to your hand. So one of the biggest things I talked about in our last podcast was card advantage. This instantly puts you up a card. So I gave it a B. Dana, what did you give it?
I gave it a B too. I thought it was pretty solid, and even though he's uninkable, I still would want to have probably 4 of him in my deck just because of his ability to return it to my hand instead of it going to instead of it staying in my discard. So, which, given how you can deck out in this game, which basically means if you as a player run out of cards in your deck, that you lose. And I know a lot of people are concerned about that. I know us in particular, when we play each other and when we've played at like the release at our LGS, we never really came close to that. So although it's not really a concern for us, I think because a lot of other people are concerned, like that also is a nice little reassurance for them to have, just because they're returning cards to their hand. So that's why I gave him a B.
Yeah, so I give him a B because I don't think that you'll necessarily run 4 of him in every deck, but maybe 2 or 3 could be really good. And I say you're probably not going to run 4 just because he's not inkable and his stats aren't great. He quests for 1, but his ability is really useful. Just imagine you trade a creature early, you play this, get that character back, and you're up a card on your opponent. it's just simple interactions like that that can lead to you getting ahead of your opponent from the very beginning or mid part of the game.
Next, we have Hey Hey Boat Snack. It is a inkable 1-drop, a 1/2, quests for 1, but it also has support. So this is the first card that we are seeing right now where it has support that we get to talk about. And so support characters add their strength, like you indicated last episode, to another character on your board. So for Hey Hey, since he's a 1/2, he gets to basically add his strength of 1 to another character.
Only when they quest.
Only when they quest. So I gave him a B. I think although he's weak, he's cheap, but it also might mean that he could probably get ignored by your opponent because they might not see him as a threat at first. I know that when you and I played a multiplayer game with some of our friends, he had Hey Hey out, and we honestly didn't think too much of him, and he was sneaky and helping our friend add that strength to his other characters and help them basically get rid of ours. So then eventually we're like, okay, I guess he is a bigger threat than we thought.
Yeah, it's kind of innocuous. You see the 1/2 stat line, and he's only questing for 1 at a time. So you're like, I could probably ignore this. But when he is questing and he can help your opponents make better trades, you're like, you know what? This plays a little bit stronger than what I initially thought, right?
Yeah, he's sneaky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also gave him a B. I think for a lot of the cards that we talk about, the most important thing is whether they are inkable or not. And he's inkable. He can go in pretty much any deck. Maybe you're controlling decks, you probably wouldn't want him in just because he doesn't really fit the game plan. But if you felt like you needed something cheap that could help your other characters make better trades, this is an option for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next one we have is LeFou, the Bumbler. He is an inkable 2-drop. He is a 1/2 as well, and he quests for 2 this time. And if you have a character named Gaston in play, this character costs 1 less ink. So there aren't really that many Gastons or anything. So this is mostly just going to be a 2-cost, 2-questing, inkable character. I gave him a C. There are some archetypes maybe with Stitch Rockstar that you would play this in, but I just the stats just aren't there for a 2-drop in my opinion, especially when he does quest for 2, which is good, but he doesn't really do anything beyond that. So I think he's just a pretty weak card in general.
Yeah, I actually gave him a C too. I thought the same thing. I mean, we're going to look into a card here in a bit that is also an inkable 2-drop that is a 2/3 and not a 1/2. So I feel like just his stats in general are a little weaker for being 2-drop. Yes, he does quest for 2 like you said, but I think at least his ability, since we don't have a lot of Gastons, it's not going to be a card that you're going to want to play right now. Maybe in the future, but not right now.
Yeah, it's just not it right now.
Yeah. All right, next we have Lilo Making a Wish. It is a uninkable 1-drop. She's a 1/1 and she quests for 2. I gave her a B. She might be cheap and weak, but so she's not necessarily good for attacking, but she can get on the board quick because she is so cheap. She quests for 2. It would be really good as a first turn to get on. So I gave it a B.
Yeah, I gave it a B too. 1-drops that quest for 2 are not very common, and while this doesn't have great stats, it's easy to kill through challenging. You are in the color that has probably the most bodyguard characters, so it's the easiest to protect, and you're also in the color that has Stitch Rockstar, which we'll talk about later, which really makes these cheap questers even better than what they normally would be. I think just the fact that it's the cheapest you can be and a quest for 2 probably deserves a B at least.
Yeah, and I feel like if you have a couple of her in your deck, if you get her on first turn and you're lucky enough for that, then you can quest with her for 2, and then if your opponent challenges her, knocks her out, and then you see her later in the game, and then you have bodyguards too, that would be good. But I think at least to just hurry up and get 2 lore right away on your second turn after she dries, or that summoning sickness goes away. I think it's good just to get 2 above.
Yeah, I can definitely see it being pretty easy for you to get 4, maybe 6 quick lore out of her before she's interacted with, and that's really all you want from your 1-drop in those kind of aggressive decks, right?
Yeah.
The next card we have to talk about is Maximus Palace Horse. This is a good one, Dana. Tell us about it.
So he is a inkable 5-drop, a 4/5, quests for 1. He has bodyguard and support. So if you enter him into play exerted and you have other Glimmers characters cards on the board, your opponent has to attack him first before they can attack any of your other characters. And in addition to that, with that support, he has a 4 strength. So if you're using him for the support, or if you quest with him, you can give his 4 strength to someone else too. I personally gave him an S. I was just going for it. I just think he's mid-cost, so he's not extremely expensive, but he has really good strong strength and willpower, and he has both abilities that I consider to be very strong. And so I would definitely want to have 4 of these because I just think he's an overall solid card.
Yeah, it is a really good card. I gave him an A. I don't think he necessarily goes in every single deck, like the Stitch Rockstar decks might not want him, and I also think he suffers the Maui problem, which is again a card we'll talk about when we get to Ruby, but he does a lot. He's inkable. He has really good stats for his cost. He has bodyguard to protect your most important pieces, and the support ability is really good on a 4 power character so that your cheaper things can trade into their more expensive things. It's just a really well-rounded card. He only quests for 1, but how much more do you need to quest for when you have so much else positive going on for you? I think it's a solid card all around. Will be played in a lot of decks.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next one is also another Maximus, but this one is Relentless Pursuer. He is a 3-drop, inkable, 3/3, quests for 1, has Horse Kick as an ability. So when you play this character, a chosen character gets -2 strength this turn. I gave him a B. I think this is also a decent card, decent stats. It can control the board. It can help get rid of the little Glimmers before they start to build up. So you can take away their strength and use another one of your characters on the board to maybe get rid of them. And so I gave him a B.
Yeah, I initially gave him a C, but after playing against it some and just thinking about it a little more, I think it is a B. It's inkable. It's not very expensive. It has okay stats for its mana cost. I mean, really, actually pretty good stats for its mana cost. And its ability to give a character your opponent control -2 attack really just means that a lot of your opponent's 4-drops can be challenged by your 1 and 2 drops without any real major harm coming to them. So it lets you make really favorable trades on some characters. It's just a solid card all around. I agree. It's a B.
Yeah.
So the next one we have is Mickey Mouse, True Friend. This one I gave a C. He is a 3-drop inkable creature, 3/3 that quests for 2, and that's it. When I was looking at him, I was comparing him to a lot of the other 3-cost characters through all the colors, and this one in particular just doesn't have an extra ability, so it's not super useful at helping you make trades. It does quest for 2, but it also just gets outclassed by a lot of the other 3-drop characters, such as the Emerald Mickey, the Wardrobe that's an Amethyst, and it just seems like a way worse card than Rafiki and Amethyst too. I wouldn't play this in very many decks, but I could see it if you just need a 3-drop filler that has a little bit higher of a quest value. What do you think, Dana?
I think I originally gave it a B. I think though that I gave it a little bit too high of a grade. I just thought it was just a solid 3-drop that was just not anything that was impressive, but just a body. But I feel like the more I'm thinking about it. I probably did make it a little too high, but that's kind of where I was at.
No, I completely understand that. It seems like a generically fine card, but I think given the scope of a lot of the other 3-drops, it just probably won't make the cut a lot of the time.
Yeah. Okay, so next we have Minnie Mouse, Beloved Princess. She is a 2-drop inkable, a 2/3, and quests for 1. No other special abilities or anything like that. I gave her a B. I feel like she's a nice 2-drop just because most 1 or 2 drops only can do 1 or 2 damage. So because her willpower is 3, she can quest right away without you worrying about your opponent's other first character on the board getting rid of her. So you could probably get 2 or 3 turns questing with her without anybody really taking her off the board. Plus, if I compare her to another character like LeFou, who's also another 2-drop, he only is a 1/2, but she's a 2/3. Yeah, there's a difference in questing, but I don't know. I just felt like she was a little bit better.
Yeah, I think against a lot of decks, you'd rather just have the stats most of the time than the ability to have an extra lore when you quest. I gave her a B too, but in a little bit, we're going to talk about another 2-drop in Amber that is just strictly better than her. So I could see just giving her a C. The only upside to her is if you're playing a princess deck, which, I think is a good way to introduce Moana of Montanui, who is a card that most princess decks are going to be built around as well. So Moana is a 5-drop inkable creature. It is a 1/6 that quests for 3, and it has the ability, we can fix it. Whenever this character quests, you may ready your other princess characters. They can't quest for the rest of the turn. And this is a card I gave a C. It is probably B-worthy. I really just gave it a C because I don't think the princess deck is there yet.
Yeah.
I don't think they're... And this thing's stats just aren't that good. If you compare this to Maximus Palace Horse, for example, I don't think there's much of a comparison on which one is better for most decks. I do think Moana might have a place once more princesses come out, but it just doesn't seem great to me right now. And I could be totally off. Questing for 3 is quite a lot. It does have 6 willpower, so it can survive a lot of things, but I'm just not super high on this yet. It does allow you to do things like quest with your princess, and then when this quest, they can ready all your other princesses so you can make favorable trades and challenging. Or maybe some of your princesses have abilities like Cinderella that can heal some of your characters. So it could have a lot going on with it. I just don't see it right now. What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, so I feel kind of hypocritical now because I feel like I previously graded other cards based on how they currently are and then indicated that I think they could be better later. But for her, I, for some reason, just jumped to how I think she could be in the future. Mm-hmm. I did grade her higher. In my head, I think once we get better princesses, I think she can definitely be seen as like an A. I think for right now, though, I would still consider her a B just because she has the ability to quest for 3. And like you said, she can withstand a lot of challenges just because she has 6 willpower. But I think as more princesses become available and better princess decks are starting to be made, she's going to be really dangerous because she's, like you said, she's going to be kind of the epicenter of princess decks for sure. You're basically going to be able to quest with all of your princesses for free if she's on the board because you can, obviously questing makes them vulnerable to be challenged and you get to untap them or unexert them and then basically quest for 3 and then your opponent can, they can't challenge any of them the next turn except for her. But because she has that 6, she can withstand a lot, and it'll probably take a couple turns with some smaller glimmers on their side before they get rid of her, unless they have a big boy.
Yeah, unless they're, again, this is another 5-drop that gets destroyed by Maui, but again, we'll talk about that in the Ruby episode.
Yeah.
The next one we have is Mr. Smee, Loyal First Mate. It is an inkable 3-drop, quest for 1, and it is a 2/5. No other abilities. I gave it a C. it could be a B just because it's actually has a decent toughness, but I just gave it a B or a C because it's kind of a boring card, doesn't really do anything. It's not going to trade up very often, but it's also really not going to trade down with lesser creatures hardly ever because of its toughness. So yeah, it's probably a B. You could play it, but it's never going to impress you, I don't think.
Yeah, I just gave it a B. Same thing, nothing special, but it was just a solid body. So
yeah, absolutely.
Next one is Prince Philip. He is a uninkable 4-drop. Prince Philip Dragonslayer is his full name. He is a 3/3 quest for 2 and has heroism. When this character challenges and is banished, you may banish the challenged character. So I gave him an A. I think although he's uninkable, he's not expensive, quests for 2, but I think the best part is just his ability. It's kind of aggro, so it's a great way to remove a character from the board that might require a higher power anyway. So he's kind of like the sacrificial lamb, especially because his color doesn't have a lot of other cards that specialize in removal or removing cards. So the fact that you can challenge with him and then get rid of whatever glimmer they're challenging, I think makes him an A, pretty solid.
Yeah, I gave him a B, and I'm going to be honest. I read it wrong. I thought it was whenever he was challenged by a character and banished. The fact that you get to pick when you challenge, so you have that agency, you have that choice. Mm-hmm. I think that makes him a lot better. He's probably an A. He might not be a 4 of in every deck because he's not inkable, but he has okay stats. He quests for 2, and he can trade into any character your opponent has that is exerted. So I think that's pretty valuable.
Yeah.
The next one we have is Pumbaa, the friendly warthog. He is an inkable 4-drop, 3/5, and he quests for 1. I gave him a C. He has some decent stats, but that's really all there is just decent stats. He has no abilities. I just don't think you're going to put him in very many decks because I think the 4-drop slot in your deck's mana curve is often going to be filled with probably the next card on the list that we'll talk about. But
yeah, I gave him a B, so I might have been a little bit generous with that. He's not anything special, kind of like we said with Mr. Smee, but it's just kind of a solid body, I guess. I probably could have given him a C, but I don't know. Like I said, I was being probably a little generous. So, okay.
Let's talk about the next one, Dane. I know you love this one.
Yeah, for sure. Rapunzel, gifted with healing, a 4-drop, inkable, a 1/5, quests for 2, but then has the ability Gleam and Glow. When you play this character, remove up to 3 damage from one of your characters and draw a card for each 1 damage removed this way. So how did you grade her?
This is an S to me. It will go in basically every single deck. It's extremely powerful. It lets you challenge characters with a high toughness, and coincidentally it works well with characters with high toughness, which is a lot of what we've seen in Amber, like Mr. Smee and Pumbaa and Moana. It lets you challenge with your high toughness characters. It takes the damage off of them, and then it just lets you refill your hand. And card advantage is something that isn't super prevalent in the game, drawing extra cards, and this is just one of the best ways to do it. It leaves behind a decent sized body as far as your willpower goes, and a quest for 2. I think it is going to be one of the most important cards in this first set.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I think I feel a little bit better having you go first because I was worried I was maybe giving her too high of a grade. I thought maybe you would give her an A, but I'm glad that you agree and gave her an S too. I gave her an S. I think the things that she has going for her, she's not expensive. She quests for 2, and then her ability is, like you talked about, basically a 2-for-1. You're removing damage, but then you're also drawing a card, so you definitely get a 2-for-1 there.
You know, you could get it's almost like a 4-for-1. If you remove 3 damage counters, you draw a card for each one you remove. So that just leads to a lot of card draw. It's really strong.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, next one, Sebastian Court Composer. He is a Inkable 2-drop, 2/2, quests for 1, and is a singer 4. I made him a B. I feel like he has pretty typical stats for a 2-drop, but he's also a singer, so that's really nice to be able to play songs that you don't have a lot of ink for early on. So I think it would be really nice. You would be able to play him on your second turn, and then by your third turn, you're able to play like Hakuna Matata, which is a 4-drop otherwise. So I think I just gave him a B. I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, I gave this one a C. He is just going to be so much more of an ink, I think, most of the time. I just don't see the value here. There aren't enough good 4-cost songs, really, and his stats just don't cut it to me. He is just going to fail in comparison to the next card we're talking about, which is Simba Protective Cub. Why don't you tell us about that one, Dana?
For sure. 2-drop, inkable, 2/3, quests for 1, but has bodyguard. So I personally gave him a B. Although he's not a huge bodyguard, the fact that he does have it allows you to disrupt your opponent early on, because it, again, draws the attention away from something else you might have on the board, and it basically forces your opponent to get rid of him first. So I think that makes him a B.
Yeah, I gave him an A. I think it is going to be the default 2-drop in every single Amber deck, and the ability to protect one of the best 1-drops, which is Lilo making a wish on turn 2, is just really strong. There aren't very many 2-drops that can attack it and kill it straight up, banish it straight up, and it's just a really versatile card. Being so cheap, it's flexible because you can ink it, and the bodyguard ability just makes it a really good defensive tool for all the 1-drops that you need to protect.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so do you want to get into our first of 3 Stitches that we're about to talk about?
Oh yeah, I love Stitch. So this one is Stitch Carefree Surfer. I gave this one an A. It is a 7-cost inkable character. It is a 4/8, so it has so much stats. And it quests for 2. And it has the ability Ohana, which when you play this character, if you control 2 or more characters in play, you may draw 2 cards. Dana, what'd you give this?
I gave it an A as well. I feel like if he wasn't so expensive, maybe if he was like a 6-drop instead, I probably would have given him an S instead. But I think despite he's still really solid, A. And especially I think his ability is nice, because if you're playing him in like the late game, obviously you would hope to have 2 or more characters on your board, so it's nice to be able to get extra cards in your hand.
Yeah, you are in the color Amber, which is the color that is probably the best at creating and preserving their own board. So once you get to this point in the game, you should be able to have 2 characters on board. You have a lot of toughness in these colors. You have bodyguard, you have support, you have healing. You should be able to trigger his Ohana ability. And then once he's in play, he just has huge stats. We haven't really read a single card that can just deal 8 damage yet. It's just so big. It quests for 2. Your opponent's going to have a lot of trouble dealing with it once it's in play. And because it produced so much extra card advantage, they're probably just going to start falling behind very quickly if they're not already losing.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so second Stitch that we have is Stitch New Dog. So this is just a 1-drop inkable, a 2/2, quests for 1, no special abilities, but what did you give it?
I gave it a B. A lot of these cards that are 1 or 2-drop inkable characters with no abilities, they're all mostly just going to be Bs.
Yeah, I gave it a B as well. Same thing, nothing exciting, but just a typical nice little 1-drop there.
Yeah, this one might be a little bit better than a B because of Stitch Rockstar, which is the next card we're going to talk about. It enables that card to do a lot more. So let's go ahead and get into that one. We have Stitch Rockstar. He is a 6-cost inkable character. He is a 3/5 that quests for 3. He has Shift 4. So you can play this card for 4 if you play it on top of one of your other characters named Stitch. And he has the Adoring Fans ability. Whenever you play a character with cost 2 or less, you may exert them to draw a card. Dana, tell me your thoughts on Stitch Rockstar.
I gave him, and again, I almost am questioning whether I might have underestimated him. I definitely gave him an A. I'm questioning whether I should have given him an S, but I think if anything, he's kind of in that realm. So he is technically questing for 3 as a 4 drop if you shift him. So I think that that's pretty solid. And his ability is really nice if you get to the point where you're hoping to see specific cards because you're playing a character and then being able to draw. So you're drawing extra and hoping to see something that you might anticipate or hope that you get next. So, I gave him an A.
Yeah, he is an A or an S tier card. He's super strong. He's, in my opinion, probably one of the most powerful cards in the set. The only issue is that he just might not go in every single deck because not every single Amber deck is going to primarily have only 1 and 2 drop characters. But the fact that he kind of avoids the summoning sickness thing because as soon as you shift him, he can quest that turn, which gives you a big boon in quest, or he can challenge as a 3 power character as opposed to just the 2 power that the normal Stitch is and survive. Really makes it really versatile, but really the most important part is here that every time you play your Simba Protective Cub, he comes in play, you can exert it, draw a card, and then you can just keep chaining 1 and 2 drop characters one right after another. Super powerful, very good card. It is going to be the reason why you play some specific decks, and it will be, if you're playing it, it's probably gonna be the best card in your deck every time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even think about how this card could interact with your Maximus Palace horse. So if you shift this Stitch and he comes into play right away and he can quest for 3, or if you want to challenge and you already have Maximus Palace horse up, you basically can make him like a 7 strength too. So definitely could be really powerful incorporation of all of that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's really good with just the big bodyguard characters in general because they're really good at protecting them. You don't get a draw off of them, but this is the character that you probably do want to be protecting the most.
Yeah. Okay, so our last character before we start to get into our actions and items of the set is Timon Grub Rustler. So he is a inkable 1-drop. He's a 1/2, quests for 1, but then also has the ability Taste Like Chicken, where you play this character and you may remove up to 1 damage from a chosen character. What did you give it?
I gave it a C. It's fine. You can play it. I think it's worse as a 1-drop than either Stitch New Dog or Hey Hey. But maybe if at some point there's better payoffs for healing your characters, as in more reasons to play it because maybe you draw more cards whenever you heal a character or something like that in future sets, then you'd probably be more likely to play it. As it is, I think it's probably just the worst 1-drop that this color has to offer. So I give it a C.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like a common theme is I might be a little bit too generous. I gave him a B. I just thought, I mean, he doesn't necessarily do anything super exciting. His ability might be nice, but might not be applicable because if he's a 1-drop and you play him your first turn, it's not like you would have anybody to heal anyway. So
yeah, he's really just not very good on turn 1.
Yeah,
honestly.
he's not. So I feel like I kind of am starting to agree with you now on that.
Yeah,
I'll drop him down to a C. That's a good point.
Yeah, let's get into our actions and items. The first one we have is a song. It is Be Our Guest. It is look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a character card and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So I gave this card a B. Its most important application in this color is either going to be finding Rapunzel or Stitch Rockstar, probably. Those are probably going to be the 2 best cards in your deck if you're playing them. But besides that, I just don't... Digging 4 cards deep in your deck is okay, but it only lets you hit characters, so if you're playing another character or another color and you have removal spells in your deck or other songs that you might want, you're just not going to be able to get the card that you need every single time.
Yeah.
So I have it as a B. You can play it. It's inkable, but it's just not amazing.
Yeah. I had it as a B as well. I feel like you might not use all 4 in your deck, but it's at least useful when, like you said, you're needing to find a certain character and you're hoping they're that top 4. Or maybe, because I've been in situations like this, maybe you're just looking for a character that you can ink early on in the game, because I've had games where I've been drawing non-inkable characters or characters that I don't want to necessarily ink. Like maybe I already have...
Well, then you can just ink this a lot of the time, too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But nonetheless, I feel like at least it can sit at a B despite all of that.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so the next one is a action, Control Your Temper. It is a inkable 1-drop, and chosen character gets -2 strength this turn. So what did you grade that as?
This is a D to me. It's fine at letting your characters make better trades, and it has a kind of a low opportunity cost because it is inkable, but the effect just isn't actually worth a card casting it to me. It's not very good. You're not going to play it most of the time, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. I also agree with you. I gave it a D too. I think you need a very specific situation in order to play it. Otherwise, it's probably pretty useless and just goes into your ink.
Yeah. The next one is Hakuna Matata. It is a song, 4-cost inkable. Remove up to 3 damage from each of your characters. Now, that effect can be really good, but to me, this card is still a C, could even be a D. If you're going to play a 4-cost card that can heal your characters, Rapunzel is just so much better, right? It provides you some board presence, it draws you some cards. Yeah, this one could be free, but a lot of the time, when people are challenging your characters, they just straight up banish those characters. Not a lot of the time are you challenging a character and not banishing it, because you don't want your opponent to play Rapunzel and then draw 3 cards from it, or maybe play the one of Hakuna Matata in their deck so their characters get healed. I just don't think this card's very good. What do you think, Dana?
I'm actually kind of on the fence. I have it sitting in between a B and a C. I think it would be a C if it, or even a D if it just healed one character like some cards do, but I think the fact that it can heal each of your characters that have damage that are still on the board, it's good. Especially in the late game, you might have bigger bodies on the board that have certain damage, and so I think that could be really useful there.
Oh yeah, it can definitely swing games in your favor. It can definitely win you games. I just don't know if it's going to be better than a lot of other cards you can play most of the time. But the games where you do play it's good, it's going to be really good.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I just don't know how often that's going to be. All right,
Okay.
so next one we have is Healing Low. Dana's talked to me about that one.
Yep, so it is a inkable 1-drop, and it is an action that removes up to 2 damage from chosen character. So kind of what I was alluding to with Hakuna Matata, where some character or some cards only remove damage from one character, and this is one of them. So that's why I gave it a D, because I think it's pretty useless. You need a very specific situation, and it only affects one character anyway. So that's why I think it's pretty unplayable.
Yeah, I am never going to play this card in my deck. It's just not good. It's a D. It could be an F if we had an F in our grading scale, I think. So not a lot to talk about there. The next card's an interesting one. It is Just in Time. It is a 3-cost and inkable. You can play a character with cost 5 or less for free from your hand. Dana, talk to me about Just in Time.
I gave it a B. I think even though it isn't inkable, it is really beneficial that it's allowing you to play a character sooner than what you would have played it on a typical turn or ink with a typical ink projection. So I think it's a pretty solid one. I would probably put some of these in my deck.
Yeah, I think if you're playing this card, your deck kind of needs to be built around it. if you can imagine putting Maximus Palace Horse into play 2 turns earlier than what it really should be, that's very strong. I gave it an A. I think there will be decks that are specifically built around it. I can see being wrong about it. This card could honestly just not be very good at all. I could see that being the case, but it's something I definitely want to try because the power level is there, and I think as we get more cards and new sets come out, there are going to be more 5-cost characters that make this even better. So I think it's an A. I think there's a lot of 5-drop characters that are good to put into play now, and I'm really excited to try that one out.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so next one, the song Part of Your World. It is a uninkable 3-drop, and you return a character from your discard to your hand. What did you give it?
Oh, I gave this one a C. I don't think that an uninkable song that just lets you recycle a creature is very good. It just doesn't do enough for costing 3 when you just cast it without singing it. It just doesn't excite me. You might play 1 or 2 copies if you really are reliant on one specific creature or character like Stick Shrockstar, but most of the time I just don't think you're going to play very many at all.
Okay. I was on the fence, so I was around a B or C. I liked the concept behind it because you're returning characters from your discard to your hand, so you kind of get that card advantage there. But I see what you say about that, and that it, you're
it's narrow. There's not a lot of applications for it.
Yeah, and plus there are other cards that do that plus some. So I mean, if we're talking about Hades of the Lord of the Underworld, he does the same thing, but he's also a character that can quest and has stats, and he might just be 1 more cost because he's a 4 uninkable. This is a 3, but you're at least getting more out of him. So
And the really cool thing you can do with Hades is that you can just loop them. You can trade 1 Hades away, play your second Hades, get the first one back, and then keep continuing to do that, so you never run out of cards to play. Whereas with Part of Your World, you just can't do that.
yeah.
So.
Okay, so the next one, You Have Forgotten Me. This is a...
I could never forget you.
Oh my god. People are probably gonna be like, they're so cheesy. So this is a inkable 4-drop action. Each opponent chooses and discards 2 cards. What'd you give this one?
So I was on the fence about this one. I gave it a B. I think that it being inkable, like if it was uninkable, it would probably be a D. You just would never play it. But because it's a B, and it could honestly be a C, I think there are just going to be some games where you play against colors that aren't either amber or amethyst, where that color just has no ways of gaining card advantage. Mm-hmm. And you play this, they discard 2 cards, which are the 2 maybe most powerful cards in their deck, because that's just the last 2 cards they have in their hand. And if you're ahead on board and you do something like that, mm-hmm. it's really easy to stay ahead on board because they're down cards. They stack pretty well in the early to mid game. And then when you get to the late game, you can just ink them when your opponent doesn't have a lot of cards in their hand already. But in a game without a lot of card advantage, I think making them discard cards could be pretty strong. But, that only time will tell on that one.
Yeah, I was a little harsh with this one. I gave it a D. Mm-hmm. I think it could disrupt your opponent, but you're also affected by it. So,
well, it's just each opponent.
Oh, I definitely misread that card then. So,
well, you're definitely affected by it because you're paying 4 mana to not impact the board at all, which is a pretty big cost in this game. So,
yeah. All right. Well, considering that I read that wrong,
hey,
I feel like that does change things. Yeah, I probably could see it being between a B and a C just because you're disrupting, especially if they have cards in their hand that you might anticipate them maybe building up to a shift of one of their powerful characters or whatever. You can just get rid of or kind of disrupt what they got going on there.
Yeah, I don't think it's a great card, but there are definitely situations where it will probably mess up your opponent pretty good. Dinglehopper is the next one. It's an item. It's a 1-cost thinkable, and you can tap it to remove up to 1 damage from chosen character. I gave this one a C. I think there are some item decks that might benefit from playing it just because it's a cheap item, but that is really it. It's inkable, it's cheap, its just effect is not very strong, which makes sense because it's inkable cheap.
Yeah, I also gave it a C. I think it might be nice for like a cheap damage removal in the right situation, but because it would be so niche, I think there are just other cards in this color that removes damage and more of it, so it might not be worth wasting that slot in your deck with.
Yeah, this one's just so slow. You have that 1 cost healing glow that can heal 2 just for 1 mana. Now you can only do it once, but this just being really slow. You could convince me that it's a D even, but I do think there are some actual applications because it's an item. So we'll see. So the next one is Lantern. It is an item, 2 cost, uninkable. It has Birthday Lights as its ability. You can tap it or exert it to pay 1 less for the next creature you play this turn. Dana, give me your thoughts.
So I had given it a C. I feel like it could be probably in between like a B or a C, but it is really nice if you're really wanting to play a character but are short the ink to do it. Then this is a really good card to be able to kind of fill that gap and play a character quicker.
Yeah, this is a B to me. It could honestly even be an A, even though it's uninkable. It kind of does a lot. So imagine the curve of Stitched New Dog, then on the second turn you play the Lantern, and then the third turn you can tap the Lantern to play Stitch Rockstar on turn 3. And that is just one of the most strong first, 1, 2, 3 curves you can do.
Yeah.
It seems like it could be incredibly powerful. Now it is kind of narrow. It doesn't do anything late game really. But another note is that they do stack pretty well. If you have 2 of these in play, you can exert 2 of them, and then your next character is going to cost 2 less. So it helps you play maybe Surfer Stitch 1 or 2 turns earlier. It is narrow, so I could see it not being the best card, but a B or an A is where I am on it. It's going to make a big impact early in the game, I think. So that's where I am. Our last card for Amber is Ursula's Shell Necklace. It is a 3 cost, uninkable. It has the Now Sing ability. Whenever you play a song, you may pay 1 ink to draw a card. Tell me, what are your thoughts on this one?
I gave it a D. I think there are other cards in this deck that allow you to draw cards without also having to play this and play a song and pay ink. Because in order to be able to draw a card, you have to have a certain situation where you have a song to play or to sing, and then you also have to pay ink in order to even draw a card. And I feel like it's just too many steps for you to benefit just one card with.
Yeah, one of the things about songs is that you want a card that can sing it in play, so you play it for free. And this is not a card that lets you sing that song for free because it's not a character, right? So the chances of you having that extra mana to pay for this ability lying around is a little bit less. I could see it being powerful in some decks. I just don't think those decks exist right now, so I gave it a C. I could see maybe 1 or 2 copies in a deck just to have a way to create some card advantage, maybe against some of the Amethyst decks that can kind of have a lot of card advantage, but right now I just don't see it. The one good thing about it being an item is that not a lot of things can interact with it, but it just doesn't seem powerful enough to me currently.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that wraps up all of the cards in Amber. And with that being said, we thank you for joining us. We hope that you gained something out of this. And if you are wanting to hear what our thoughts are on other colors, then stay tuned for the next couple of weeks, and we promise we will go through all of them. And we'll even be posting other content, including streaming on Pixelborn, or sometimes we are going to be doing tabletop plays as well. And so we're on other social media platforms. Feel free to give us a follow so you even get updates about when new episodes on this podcast drop. So find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. We're the Inkwell Gamers. And so for today, I'm Dana.
And I am Dalton.
And we will catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening.